Hey, I'm Francis O'Kane and you're watching NVTV. Domestic violence affects every type of person, regardless of gender, sexual orientation or race. But there's a major problem when it comes to men due to the lack of awareness and recognition and the lack of services available to them. I'm joined by Peter Morris to discuss these issues further. Peter, thanks very much for joining us here today.
Thanks for your time, thank you.
Peter, could you start off by just explaining what organisation you come from?
I'm here from a group called MensAid Northern Ireland.
And what's your personal motivation for becoming a campaigner in the rights for men, victims of domestic violence?
I've been a campaigner for men with regards to family law through Real Fathers for Justice, and through that lobbying campaign over the last 3 or 4 years we've came across a lot of men who come out and say they're leaving the family home after a domestic incident and they feel they have nowhere to turn.
Could you explain just what domestic abuse is, just for anybody watching who doesn't fully understand?
Domestic abuse is classified as emotional, sexual, physical and financial and psychological abuse, which can affect men in all different ways and forms.
And Peter, you yourself have been a victim of domestic abuse. Could you explain a wee bit about what happened there and how you've come from there and now you're representing other victims?
Well, I can't go into too much detail. I've actually still got a case going through court at the moment. I was a victim of physical, emotional, psychological and what they call economic abuse. Economic abuse is where, an example, you have an employment and your partner tells you, leave that employment, I don't want you doing that job and you have to go out for dinner. That's economic abuse. I was a sufferer. January this year I had a major breakdown in my health and I was walking down, and I'm not going to deny this, I was walking down the Newtonards Road in East Belfast and I stopped at the very last phone box on the right hand side. It was my last port of call before I went to Queen's Bridge. If I reached Queen's Bridge, it was all over. I stopped at the phone box and I picked up the phone and dialed the Samaritan's phone number and the line went dead. I picked up the phone again and I dialed the number again and the line went dead. And I looked at it and it was asking me to insert money. If you're in that state of mind, the last thing you think is to lift money. That was my last port of call. Now that changed my mindset. That was the last point for a man to seek help, and you couldn't get it unless you have money in your pocket. Now, we've highlighted this to DHSSPS, and we've asked DHSSPS to make sure that Lifeline, which is a free phone number, is advertised in all the public phone boxes within Northern Ireland. We've also asked them to install a Lifeline phone kiosk of some sort where there's potential for suicides to take place, i.e. Queensbridge, Albert Bridge, and we want these phones put in place. As yet, they've not come back to us with that, but they say they will take it on. In my case, there was absolutely nowhere to go. That phone call changed my mindset and I went to my GP the next day. I went to counselling for a few months and I'm the person I am today. I'm a far better person now.
And so how have things changed? You said you've suffered for 10 years. How have things changed over the last 10 years? Have services have got better? But
No, definitely not. We are still in the same scenario where you have absolutely nowhere to go. If you've suffered domestic violence and you're out in the street at 11 o'clock at night, you have nowhere to go. You can go into a hostel in the town, one of the hostels, YMCA, whatever, Corporation Street, but that's not the type of place that a man who's in an emotional state needs to go. He needs somewhere to go where you're totally independent of everyone else and it's a specific building for that purpose. You need someone to be able to speak to you there and then at the time and someone to put your head down where you feel safe. At this moment in time, that service is not available in Northern Ireland for men.
And you mentioned that there's almost an embarrassment for men to come forward and to admit. What was the steps, what was the triggers that made you just say, that's it, I have to get help?
That night in January, when I walked into that phone box, it just turned me around, totally turned me around.
How prevalent is male domestic violence in today's society?
It's becoming more and more prevalent now. If you look at the PSNI stats, we have a lot more men who are coming forward. We're looking at, over a year period, about 2,000 cases reported to the police. These are only reported cases. But if we had the setup of an organisation and a helpline out with the police stats, we would expect more and more men to come forward and speak to us.
And Peter, could you explain a wee bit about what PAS is?
PAS is parental alienation syndrome. It's where a parent, either parent, mother or father, is kept away from the child for no reason, basically, and the parent cannot see the child and the child cannot see the parent, and the child also misses out on seeing the parent's extended family. The child is alienated from the family. Now, the children suffer because they talk about their extended family and they can't see them, and the other parent who is alienated also suffers because they can't see the child. We are pushing at the moment, and it's a worldwide issue. If you have to search PAS on the internet. It's a worldwide issue. We're all trying to get that recognised as a syndrome and recognised within the psychological industry, well, psychological medicine, that is a syndrome and needs treated.
We're here today to highlight the lack of support for male domestic victims. What support is there actually available at present?
The only support services for male victims of domestic violence at the moment, there are two groups within Belfast. I won't give out their names. The two groups both offer the same service, which is a counselling service and anger management. One group in particular receives £35,000 per year of DHSS PS in funding. We do not agree with the way it's been worked. They only provide a service costing £10,000, which is a counselling service for men. The other group is a charity set-up who give out anger management to men, which we think it's not what men need. You know, some men do need anger management, but we should not have a group represented on government level supplying anger management. It's a charity set-up, but they charge men £40 per session and then £100 at the end of that session for a report, should they have to go back to the family courts. We have a MARAC referrals, which is a multi-agency risk assessment conference. It's chaired by all different government bodies, the police, DHSS, PS, SSA, social services and such like. The only way men get to that level is if they come forward and report it, and you only get to that level if your class is high risk of domestic violence. And the only other services available are through your own GP, a counselling service, and that's all the services we have available at the moment in Northern Ireland.